Hey guys, and welcome! Today's video is going to prepare you for the melody writing section of the Harmony 9 RCM written exam. I won't be going into detail about specific melody writing techniques in this video, but we'll be focusing on the question itself that you'll be seeing on your exam. I've got a 5-step process to guide you through setup and execution that should help simplify the question and make it seem a little less overwhelming. Here's an example of what you'll see on your exam. They've given you the first phrase, and using this we need to write 3 more phrases, each 4 measures long. For this example, we'll be using rounded binary form with 2 contrasting musical periods. Let's start with step 1, setting up your score. Using a ruler, add a bar line and a brace to the start of each line. Next, add your clefs and a key signature. Time signatures are only found at the start of the piece or when a time signature changes. So since we're not changing ours, we don't need to add any additional time signatures throughout. At the end of line 1 and 3, we're going to add a single bar line. And at the end of line 2 and 4, we're going to add a repeat sign. These repeat signs are indicative of the rounded binary form. And finally, at the start of line 3, add a repeat sign. It goes after the clefs and the key signature. I can't emphasize the importance of step 2 and 3 the most. We're going to start by adding our structural phrasing because I like to visualize my phrases and prepare my cadences first. This helps me avoid that feeling of being lost mid-phrase. And since our given phrase begins with a quarter note pickup, we should begin all of our phrases the same way. But let's be careful with phrase 3. Our pickup note needs to be included with the repeat sign. So I'm going to add a bar line here and a rhythm marker to remind me to do so once I start writing. Before labeling our cadences, let's identify the key signature. And then I'm going to go and label the functional chord symbols for the given phrase, as well as the type of cadence and the key it's in. Keep in mind, at the level 9, we're not required to modulate in our melody writing. So remember, with the musical period, we typically have a question phrase and an answer phrase. So the second phrase of each one is going to end with an authentic cadence in the home key to give a sense of completion. And for my third phrase, I'll plan to use a half cadence here to offer some contrast and give the listener a real sense of the question and answer with our second musical period. The last step in the prepare stage is to label our sections. In rounded binary, section A begins at the start of phrase 1, section B begins at the start of phrase 3, and section A returns at the start of phrase 4. Jumping right into step 3, we're going to plan our technique for each phrase. Good melody writing has a healthy balance of repetition and contrast so that the piece feels tied together but not redundant. Some of the main techniques for this level include repetition, variation, inversion, and sequences. Since we have 3 phrases to write, I'm going to use a new technique with each. Rounded binary means that the first phrase is going to return at the end, therefore phrase 4 will use the technique of repetition. With phrase 2, I don't want to contrast too much right away. I like to use either variation or inversion with this phrase. You can combine techniques if you like, but today I'm going to be using inversion. With phrase 3, I want to offer contrast. So here I'm going to use a motif I find in phrase 1 and apply a sequential pattern to it. In step 4, we're going to begin to write. So let's start with phrase 4 since I'll just be rewriting the first phrase. Phrase 1 happens to end with an authentic cadence, so I can pretty much just rewrite the whole phrase, but more often than not, the first phrase ends with a half cadence. If this were the case, you'd need to adjust the last 2 measures or so to allow for an authentic cadence. With my phrase, I'm going to end with 1 long note instead of the rhythm you see at the end of measure 4, just to make things sound a little bit more final. With phrase 2, I've decided to use the inversion technique. This means I'm going to take the given material in phrase 1 and I'm going to invert the intervals. Just be aware that the exact interval may not be possible if it doesn't make harmonic sense. The notes you choose should function as one of the 2 categories. It should be a chord tone, therefore you need to be aware of your tonal hierarchy and the chord choices you're making, or it should be a non-chord tone. That doesn't mean it's just a random note that doesn't belong, it should be an identifiable non-chord tone. If it doesn't fit into one of these 2, don't choose it. In phrase 3, I need to see a noticeable break from the repetition. This can be rhythmically, harmonically, and even melodically. So I'm using a sequence derived from a motif found in phrase 1. I'm not reinventing the wheel, I'm just using stuff from the material I've been given. Let's take a moment to notice how my rhythm choices mimic phrase 1, especially at the cadences. This is where we see that use of repetition with slight adjustments to allow for contrast. You'll notice as I near the cadence that I adjust the pattern. I do this for 2 reasons. My melody needs to imply a half cadence, and to give a more arc-like shape to my melody. My melody doesn't span a wide range, but there is a natural high point in the 3rd measure and a fall towards the cadence. The entire time I've been writing, I've been consciously aware of the implied harmony my melody is creating. The last step we need to do in the writing stage is to add functional and root quality chord symbols to phrase 3 only. The notes need to belong to the chord I'm labeling, or they need to be an identifiable non-chord tone. If you're not able to label each note, now's the time to adjust them. And with that, we enter the final step. Once you're complete, take a few moments to look it over. Look for any notation errors, any missed rests, and make sure to go back through the question itself. Some exams will ask for root quality chord symbols, whereas others won't, so make sure you've gone over the question in detail to make sure that you've completed all that's expected of you. A couple of helpful points to remember. At a cadence, our melody should end in one of 2 ways. Half cadences should end on unstable scale degrees, which is scale degree 2 or 7, and authentic cadences should end on stable scale degrees, which is 1 or 3. At the end of your piece, you especially want to try to end on the tonic. Your melodies should have an arc-like shape to them when possible. We also want to avoid too many skips in a row, especially in the same direction. So break this up with some steps in the opposite direction. Finally, always be aware of how you're using your leading tone, especially in minor keys. I hope you guys found this helpful. If you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover, leave me a message and let me know. Good luck on your exams, and remember, a little prep goes a long way.